Stay classy, Golden Eagles. So this is going to be part 2 of lesson number 2. I'm going to continue. What you guys are going to do is while I read the next section, which is about 4 to 5 pages, I want you to be thinking about the most important idea just from those 4 to 5 pages, okay? Not through the whole book, but just this particular excerpt or section that I'm reading, okay? So I'm going to start off on the page that we left off. I'm just going to read the last sentence. Some elders have to be shocked for everybody's good now and then. Amelia was 11 years old when she first saw an airplane. It was 1908, 5 years after the Wright brothers made their first successful flight. Amelia wrote later that at the time she thought it was just a thing of rusty wire and wood. Not at all interesting. After high school, Amelia went to Ortonza, and I'm probably saying that wrong, school in Pennsylvania. Amelia was tall and thin. In a letter to her parents from school, she drew a sketch of herself dressed in a suit and a pleated skirt and wrote, "I look like a broomstick wrapped round and round," she said, and wrote later, "Did I tell you I have a reputation for brains?" Amelia spent Christmas 1917 with her sister in Toronto, Canada. There she saw soldiers who had returned from the First World War. Years later, she wrote, "For the first time I realized what the World War meant. Instead of new uniforms and brass bands, I saw only the results of 4 years desperate struggle. Men without arms, legs, men who were paralyzed, and men who were blind." Soon after the holiday, Amelia quit school. She went back to Toronto, became a nurse's aide, and cared for the war's wounded. While Amelia was in Toronto, she went to a nearby airfield and had another look at airplanes. Some years later, she explained that although I had seen 1 or 2 at county fairs before, I now saw many of them. I hung around in my spare time and absorbed all that I could. Okay, guys, so here's what I want you to do. That was 4 to 5 pages that I just read, and I want you to think about it, and if you need to, you can go back and hear me reread those pages again. And I want you to think about it, and I want you to type in the Google document what you think the most important idea is from those just 4 or 5 pages, all right? So go ahead and hit pause, think about it, write it down, and then we'll get started again. All right, guys, so you had some time. I'm hoping that you took some time, paused, and thought about it, and typed up capitalization, punctuation, everything like that, what the main idea of those last 4 to 5 pages were, okay? So we're going to go ahead and continue on, and there'll be 2 more stops where we're going to do that, okay? After the war, Amelia studied automobile engine repair. The next year, she took courses in New York City at Columbia University and Barnard College. At first, she was preparing to study medicine. Later, she decided to do medical research. After the school year ended, Amelia went to be with her parents who had moved to California. On Christmas Day, 1920, she went to an air show, and 3 days later, she paid $1 for a 10-minute airplane ride. "As soon as I left the ground," she wrote later, "I knew I, myself, had to fly." In January 1921, Amelia took her first flying lesson. In July, she bought her first airplane. She paid for the lessons and airplane with money she earned working for the Los Angeles Telephone Company and with money given and loaned to her by her mother and sister. Flying wasn't as safe then as it is today. Airplanes were powered by small engines. Amelia had several crash landings. Once she was thrown into an open field. Another time her airplane turned over in heavy rain and Amelia held in by her safety belt hung upside down. All right, guys, so there's the end of another one. So I want you in your next spot, I want you to think about what's the most important idea. Okay, what's the most important idea from that particular, I think it was 3 pages that we just read. If you need to go back, you can rewind the video back a couple of minutes and hear me reread those again, but you should now have your second main idea from your second section, okay? All right, guys, now that you've had a little bit more time, I'm going to go and you should have 2 of your own written down in the Google Doc titled A Picture Book of Amelia Earhart, Think, Pair, Write. Now we're going to continue on at the last section, and it'll be 3 pages. In 1924, Amelia's parents divorced. She sold her airplane and bought a yellow sports car and drove her mother east to their new home in Medford, Massachusetts. Sam Chapman, a chemical engineer, followed Amelia east. Chapman wanted Amelia to marry him, but Amelia refused to become what she called a domestic robot. At the time, she said, "I don't want to marry anybody." On weekdays, Amelia had a job as a social worker in a community center in nearby Boston, teaching English to immigrant children. On weekends, she flew for sport and as a saleswoman and as a saleswoman for an airplane builder. In May 1927, Charles Lindbergh became the first to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. The next year, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to make the flight. She was co-passenger aboard an airplane named Friendship. In June 1928, Amelia, Bill Schultz, and Slim Gordon climbed into the airplane Friendship. It was painted orange so it would be easy to find in case of an accident, and fitted with pontoons so if they couldn't complete the trip, they could land on the ocean. Before the trip, Amelia telegraphed her mother, "Don't worry, no matter what happens, it will have been worth the trying." While Schultz flew the plane, Amelia checked maps and kept a record of their speeds and altitude. She also looked out the window at the clouds and described them as marvelous shapes in white. She wrote, gulping beauty. On June 18, 1928, after 24 hours and 40 minutes in the air, the plane landed in the water in the harbor of Bury, Port Wales. Amelia described the flight as a grand experience, but since she didn't pilot the plane, she felt like she was baggage. So, again, what was the most important idea of those 4 pages that we just wrote? The 4 pages that we just read. I want you to type that into the Google Doc, what is important to know or to remember about the story. So here's what I want you to do. You need to have completed 3 most important ideas from the 3 different passages that we just read as a group. The first one I did with you guys, and that one was, as a young girl, Amelia did things that shocked some people. Now you don't have to copy word for word like apart from the story like I did for my example. It can just be something that you take away from. I could have changed that and said it, as a young girl, Amelia did things that appalled or shocked or terrified other people. All right. Or she did things, or I could have said she did things that weren't the normal for young ladies. Okay. So it doesn't have to be an exact quote. It just needs to be the main idea from the 3 different spots. Okay. So you're going to have 3 ideas, and I set up bullet points for you guys. So you should have 3 different bullet points. So there should be a total of 5 of them. All right. If you have any questions, email Mr. Holt or myself, or leave a question in the comments below. As always, stay classy, Golden Eagles.